What if showing up on camera is not an option? It's not that you haven't tried or that you're afraid of the camera, but what if there is a real legitimate reason, that you don't want to be on camera? It could be something because of it doesn't work for you because of your life, your culture, your industry, or even your comfort zone. If that is the case, then this discussion is going to be for you. My name is Rana Al Basri Mawad, and I'm a communication strategist and a personal brand expert. And in this episode, I want to talk about building a personal brand that leverages trust, where it directly impacts your career or it impacts your business positively. And how can we do that with faceless personal brand? How does that happen? Because you see, what I've been seeing a lot is that on social media, I've seen a lot of advice that assumes that you are able to build a personal brand with the assumption that you are going to do it by using video. And it assumes that you are someone who's going to be comfortable with your face on the screen. And for a lot of founders that I've known and I've seen out there, and some of them are those who are building across different cultures or different industries. They have different norms, for example, and they simply have a different relationship with visibility. So this kind of assumption and these kind of tips that is out there, it doesn't hold. So what are we going to do about it? And with this question, I want to be clear. It is not a consolation prize. We're not trying to find a way out of it, but we're trying to look at personal brand from the side or from the angle of personal brand is about sending the right signals, the signals of trust, where trust helps you to build a relationship with the right audience that you are targeting, and therefore turns that trust into something that builds your credibility, which impacts your career or which impacts your business. So some of the strongest personal brands that are out there, that some of them that I know, are built by people who don't use camera or don't use video as a main way or tactic when building their personal brand, with the exception of them being in interviews in the media or being in interviews on the podcast. So this is the first mindset shift. Faceless does not mean invisible. It just needs a different type of strategy. And this matters more than you think. The belief that you have to be on camera to build a personal brand, and that's the only way to do it, it's a very recent belief. And this idea came about with the rise of the creator economy, when a lot of, other than social media influencers, but a lot of founders, a lot of experts, a lot of entrepreneurs, they are basically becoming, or they became creators themselves. They all have digital footprint online. We all do, because media has been democratized, and now with the help of social media, we all have that kind of digital footprint. Now, we cannot deny that those platforms genuinely reward video. So it's a face forward content, especially very prominent platforms. Not all of them, but very prominent platforms like TikTok or Instagram, maybe a bit of Facebook. They all reward video. But to put this idea that video first is the only way to build a personal brand, this is a kind of an error. Because, and for the people who have always been following my journey here, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Personal brand is your reputation. It is what people think and feel and say about you. And when we're building a reputation, it is built through expertise, through consistency, proof, through context, through relevance. None of those require a camera. So if you are an entrepreneur or a founder or an expert who is struggling with this particular area, showing up on camera, and everything around you is convincing you that you're not building a personal brand correctly because you are not doing video, then I want you to know that this kind of belief is something that we need to dismantle. So, this tactic of faceless marketing, it is not for everybody. Who is it really for? I want to be specific about who I am talking to, because this is not a one size fits all conversation. Faceless marketing is not for everyone. There are certain founders or certain experts from cultures where putting themselves forward publicly is not common. There are places where, for example, particularly for women or for certain industries or certain businesses, visibility on camera is not something that is being pushed in a positive way. The visibility that is celebrated in some parts of the world can actively undermine credibility in other cultures and in other contexts. So this is the first thing. It's not a one size fits all. There are founders in certain industries where very high personal visibility through video, it creates a professional risk for them. Some of those are legal industries or healthcare industries or maybe financial industries. In certain markets, it's a high risk, while in other markets, it isn't. So we also need to consider that they are regulated industries where what you say publicly can have some kind of compliance implications. If you are one of those people in that category, then faceless marketing when you're building your personal brand is an option. Now, let's talk on a personal level. There are introverts who can deliver exceptional work, but find performance style content using video very draining for them. And we cannot deny that this is a problem that a lot of people face. And yes, there are tools and ways and trainings that can help you become a better speaker on camera. But let's be pragmatic here. What is the other solution? Is there another solution? So we need to consider that there are founders or entrepreneurs or even experts who are brilliant in a room with 10, 20, 30 people, but they kind of lose their energy when it comes to looking into the camera. There are founders who simply have certain circumstances like privacy considerations or family situation or even physical comfort that is not there when it comes to being on camera. So it makes video simply not the right tool at the moment for them. So these are all legitimate reasons. None of them are personal brand death sentences. What are other tools that is out there that we can use to communicate, to use in building our digital presence and personal brand by utilizing them? So let's put it this way. Faceless personal brand can actually look differently for different people. Let me walk you through different formats and different levels of how do you build a real reputation without requiring to be on camera all the time. The first format is very well known. It's the written content, and it's one of the oldest and most trusted formats in professional reputation building. It is one of the strongest ways of building a personal brand other than video creation. And the biggest proof is that you see platforms like Substack coming up and growing tremendously, especially now while we're still filming this podcast episode. So we cannot deny that a very well-crafted LinkedIn post, for example, that kind of helps you to demonstrate a very specific thinking that you have, or a really good newsletter that gives your audience or your target audience something that they can use, any kind of long form article that is published on media or even on your owned platforms that can showcase your very clear position on a topic of expertise. These are all material or types of content that give the same reputation signals as video. There are different ways of giving away those reputation signals, the credibility signals. The only difference is that they work very differently from video. So the written format is an option, and there are amazing platforms out there that you can utilize for the written format. And they do also give the same reputation signals. They just simply work differently. And the speed at how they work is also a little bit different. So we need to keep that in mind. This type of content basically rewards depth over charisma on camera. So if you are an expert with really, really strong expertise and a very distinct point of view and opinion, written content can be actually more powerful than video for you. Another type of format, and this is something that has also been there for quite some time, is the audio-only podcasting. And I believe that it is deeply underused as a personal brand tool in a lot of markets in the world. And some markets are better than others, but it is still an underused tool when it comes to building a personal brand. Because if you take me right now, it's very recent that I started having my podcast on YouTube other than on my podcast platforms. It's always been audio only. And if now I am using it also as a tool, not only to share what do I have and to share my knowledge, but also it is part of my brand building. So for my listeners, if you're listening to this instead of watching me, these listeners, they don't see me on camera. I'm not on camera for them. They don't see my face. But over the course of a 70 plus episode podcast, there has been a relationship that has been built with my listeners. So what happens is that, how's my personal brand being built? My thinking becomes familiar to them. My point of view is recognizable to them. And this is what personal brand is. My medium was audio. The asset is still reputation. Okay, so do you see how we need to look at it in a different way? And we need to find which tool that we can utilize that actually works with our strengths based on our current comfort and circumstantial situation. If we're going to go a little bit on a next level, if we're going to utilize mainly faceless ways of creating content for building our personal brand, but we are slowly introducing video into the mix, but with very controlled frequency, then another way of building a personal brand with faceless and a small injection of visual would be guest appearing on other people's platforms. So it could be guest appearing on podcasts. It could be more publicly, like being on panel, so public speaking in panels, or it could be in webinars. So most of our brand building, digital online presence on brand building level is faceless, but we inject once in a while webinars or masterclasses that we film and we put out there as part of our brand building plan or strategy. So if you're guest appearing in other people's podcasts, or if you are being more open to having a presence in terms of public speaking or panels, what happens is that that's a great tool to start with, because you are borrowing the credibility and the reach from the organizer, who is the podcast host or the event host, without requiring you to build your own visual presence from scratch. So it doesn't require you to be consistent, to be part of that, the strategy, your strategy of building a personal brand by utilizing online. So you're basically using the fact that you're being chosen by someone else whose audience already trusts them, and you're borrowing that trust from that audience, from this host. So it's also a trust signal that basically at the present moment, you maybe are unable to manufacture on your own. So whether you decide to speak both in person or virtually, it is another way, if we want to look at it, of more controlled type of being in front of people. So it's more controlled than having video content that you use by distributing on your own social media. It's very powerful, faceless type, if you want, that is much more controlled. When you're standing in front, in front of people in a room, whether physically or online, you are able to share your expertise. You are able to share your knowledge. You're able to share your point of view in a controlled format with a certain number of people. And when you're filming that, the camera question kind of disappears, because what matters at that time is your ability to communicate your thinking and your knowledge to a very controlled environment. So you're able, if we're talking again about injecting video slowly, into your overall strategy of faceless marketing, this is a very controlled way of injecting it slowly. Another way of creating a controlled environment is by creating your own community. So there are different platforms that can help you to create your own community, where you use your faceless content, whether it is written or audio, and you drive people to be part of a close community, where then you are in control of that environment. You're in control of the vibe of the place. So showing up, even if you decide to show up on video to your community, it's a very controlled environment, and it's a private environment. So it's not something public that you have on social media, but it's more of something that you are controlling, that can help you with any kind of difficulties that you have, be it in industry based or personal or cultural. Because what you're doing is that you are able to create a community where it will help you to become consistent of connecting with them and building more and more of your brand, of your personal brand, because you are controlling not just the consistency of showing up in your community as a leader, but also the proximity to those people. Whether you do that as an online way of talking to your community, or if it's offline, if you decided to do it through private events or private master classes or masterminds. So what happens is that you become the person who basically always shows up when it is relevant to a certain community, with the values that you have, with the value of the substance that you have and the expertise that you have. And it is part of building those the trust signals and building your personal brand. And it doesn't require a ring light, for example. So I want to talk more about how can we have trust signals that work without video. And this is where basically what we say is that what builds trust as a faceless personal brand becomes very much specific in the quality of the content and the quality of the thinking that you are sharing. So if you decide that faceless marketing to build your personal brand is the way for you at the moment, then specificity, that was a big word, specificity in thinking and being very precise and distinct in your point of view is much more important than what medium you're using. So medium matters less, but the way that you think, your distinct point of view, your views, your expertise become much more important. The second thing with faceless marketing is that you need to be consistent, because the dynamics of how faceless marketing works differently from video, that consistency is the only way that will help you see the rewards. So showing up reliably in a format that suits you, that you've decided that this works for you week after week after week, this is what builds the familiarity that you need. And basically, with that consistency, results, proof also adds value. This is where client outcome adds value, case studies, testimonials, all of that builds with the faceless content creation. All of them together becomes like a package that are trust signals that you have the ability to utilize. That is not video, if video is not a format that is suitable for you at the moment. And then when we talked about being available for guesting at podcasts or in live events online or in person, this is where third-party endorsement comes also into play. And you need to also inject it into your faceless content creation. So this is where media features become important, like being featured in publications or being quoted in publications, being invited to events that are very prominent, or even being recommended by people that your audience already trust. So this creates a very clear pattern. Trust is built through the quality and the consistency of what you decide that you want to contribute. And this, at that stage, trumps the format. It kind of becomes more credible than actually just focusing on the format. Okay? So, how do you decide what works for you? Let's take this to the next level. And I don't want this episode or this topic to be like an excuse of not, intentionally going out of our comfort zone when we're building a personal brand. Because one of the things that when you're intentional, when you're building the personal brand, it really kind of puts the spotlight on things that you were aware and ignoring, or maybe you were not aware about yourself, the gaps that you have in your own capabilities, and also the spotlight on the things that you didn't know you had, courage or some kind of charisma or anything else. So when you're actively building your personal brand, this is one of the greatest things that will help you also kind of self-reflect and decide and see what you need to work on yourself or not. It's also about personal growth and building new skills and new things. So the practical questions that I would say, whether to be on camera or not, or whether your circumstances doesn't help you to be on camera or not, the practical question is, what format? Okay, before the practical question, I want to say something. If you are in a situation or within an industry or a culture where it is simply not an option, then there's your answer. But if you are someone who is like not really sure where do you stand, the practical question I would say would be, what format will allow you to demonstrate your expertise as much as possible with authenticity and, importantly, with consistency? If you are starting now to build your personal brand, you're starting now to focus on building your personal brand, this is the question for you. The most important thing is to start and to be consistent. So, what format will allow you to demonstrate your expertise, your brilliance, most consistently and most authentically? That is the question that you need to ask yourself. Because for some of you, the answer would be writing immediately. Some of you would be like, I'm okay with my voice. I'm okay with using my voice. And audio is something that I can be consistent as. Some of you would say, okay, I will do writing, but I would like to focus more on showing up in certain rooms, physically or virtually. So I want to focus more on my public speaking and on giving keynotes and giving master classes and all of that. Although I think that keynote speaking and all of that could be an addition, but some people would use it as the first tool. So whatever is good for you at the moment to kickstart the process, do it. But you have to be aware that once you reach a level of consistency and a level where your credibility is kind of established in a certain format, this is where you need to kick open new doors and get out of that comfort zone and try add-ons to your strategy. So I don't want it to be like a way out of it. Okay, I don't need to be on video and this is what I'm gonna do. No, it's a way, if this is what's going to get you through the first hurdle of being consistent and of really taking your personal brand seriously, then go for it. But you have to be aware that this is just the first step of the ladder. And most importantly, I really hope that you don't fall into the mistake of trying to copy anybody else's format because it just simply worked for them. If you see a format that is out there that you found very interesting, ask yourself, does this format allow me to showcase my best thinking, and to be consistent? Does this format works for me, for my context, for my environment, for my industry, for my cultural restrictions maybe? Because there are founders, for example, or entrepreneurs who write brilliantly, but they speak awkwardly on camera. Okay, so if they're just starting out, they should be writing and then do certain trainings on speaking in front of the camera and take it to the next level later on. But start writing. And there are other founders who could be extraordinary in conversation. So podcast or being on panels could be something amazing instead of them wrestling with trying to be consistent by publishing a newsletter. So we need to be kind of kind to ourselves, especially in the beginning, to choose the right format and then add on. We don't want to stay in that comfort zone, but we need to know how can we play on our strengths so that there will be consistency and a format that can help us really showcase our brilliance. Because that's the important thing. At the early stage, you need to match the format to the way that you think and the way that you communicate best. That's a good first step. This is a foundational step if you want, because it's important that the first step should be sustainable. It should be authentic to you as a person so that your personal brand can come out and be seen as authentic. And if that happens with a camera, okay. And if it happens without it, okay. That's the important thing. And here's the thing that you also have to know. Whether the format that you choose, whatever you decide the format that you want to choose in terms of being it faceless marketing, always remember that the growth and the connection when you're using a certain format, it's very different than other formats. So faceless marketing is a format, but it works differently than other formats at the moment. So today, for example, no one can deny that for social media, on very major social media platforms, the fastest way of growing online and for you to hit, a big reach is video. But it does not mean that there are no other ways and other formats and other platforms that you can use without video and it will obstruct your reach. No, that's not the case. So we need to be smart about our choices, and we need to be comfortable with the idea that different formats, different platforms means different velocity in terms of reach and impressions, and also it requires different intensity. That means mainly maybe being consistent in the written format needs more cadence than another format. So Choose your format based on, number one, how you communicate best, what is comfortable for you, and then be honest with yourself about the kind of growth that you are building on that format and about the timeline that you want to put for yourself when you're working with that. I really hope, I want to close with this. I really hope that this episode kind of helps you look at building the trust signals in different ways. We don't want to put ourselves in a certain bubble and then we're unable to come out of it. Faceless does not mean invisible. It's just different. Your reputation, your personal brand is built by what you contribute in your marketing. It is built by how consistent you are in your contribution and whether the right people can find it and they need it and then they can connect with it. Camera is one tool, the written format is another tool, audio is another tool. It is not a one tool solution or way or strategy. And for me, many of the founders that I honestly respect, I find them on Substack, for example, and I love that they've used that tool because it helps me understand them more and understand their way of thinking better and connect with them on a different level than another platform for those founders. And in the end, as usual, if this episode was useful, please share it with a founder who has been sitting on the sidelines when it comes to building a personal brand because they don't like video or because they're not comfortable with video. I hope this episode helps them that it is not the only path and there are other ways. And as always, please don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Keep making waves. Bye for now.